Good evening and welcome to Pride in London Live. I'm Reya El-Salahi, really pleased to be with you this evening for a very special episode talking about mental health, health awareness and the challenges that LGBT people face in London today. I'm joined by a stellar lineup, if I do say so myself, a panel that involves people who are working on the front line of this, who have lots of experience with this and who are going to be sharing their experiences and their thoughts on things today. So first up, we've got Adele Roberts, the BBC Radio 1 DJ and supporter, ambassador of the mental health charity Heads Together. Adele, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Really good to have you with us. Also Marc Thompson, an activist and co-founder of Prepster, which is a group aiming to educate and agitate for HIV prevention drug PrEP. Marc, welcome.
Hi, good evening.
We've got a Baroness on the panel, Baroness Elizabeth Barker, a Liberal Democrat peer and the party's LGBT and health spokesperson. Really good to have you with us.
Thank you, delighted.
And last but by no means least, Gay Times columnist and among many other things, Tom Knight. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So this episode is all about health and mental health and some of the issues that you may have personal experience of watching at home, or perhaps would like to chime in with your thoughts on any of the things you hear being discussed. Just get in touch by commenting below. It's really as simple as that. And kicking things off, let's just get straight into it with a discussion on the health challenges that the LGBT people face today. Adele, you work closely with a charity on this. You've done lots with them for it. Starting off, if you're an LGBT person in London today, what are you disproportionately likely to be affected by when it comes to health?
Definitely mental health, and that's something I've been learning a lot more about through Heads Together, and it's something that I've addressed for myself. So talking about the different types of health, I think I always thought physical health, first of all. That's what you taught about at school, not sexual health. I don't feel like I had enough sexual health training. And then mental health was the last thing I learned about as an adult, which is a shame really, because I think a lot of people are suffering in silence. And through Heads Together, it's just been my pleasure really to talk about it as much as I can and let the young listeners of Radio 1 know that they're not alone and that we've all been there and we're all the same and we're here for them.
Yeah, Marc, same to you. You know, disproportionately, what are you more likely to be affected by?
I mean, I think it depends on who you ask and who you look at, and the community is incredibly diverse, and so there are some things that impact on parts of the community more than others. So, as Adele said, you know, mental health is a huge issue, which impacts on so many other things that kind of roll out of our lives. My area of expertise that I really work on is sexual health, and so we still see that parts of our community are disproportionately affected by HIV. We've seen some great things happen in the past year with HIV rates go down, but within certain parts of our community, particularly our gay male community, we're still seeing HIV rates in particular parts of that community.
There's almost a sense, isn't there, that health issues live alone. If you, I don't know, have a depression, that's not linked to anything else. And I mean, we'll get into more of this, I'm sure, later. But there really is a sense, isn't there, as with many communities, that lots of these things are interlinked.
Absolutely, yeah. All of the things that go on in our lives, there's an intersection. So they are going to link together.
Yeah, talking about challenges, Elizabeth, what for you are some of the main challenges, not just the health concerns, but the challenges that LGBT people living in London face today?
I think there's two. The first is the fact that we all get lumped together as LGBT, and actually we are very different.
Does it bother you when you hear people say, you know, LGBT health issues? Is that a concern?
No, and I understand why people do it. But what I think is that actually all of us have very different health issues. I would say, speaking as lesbian and bi women, complete invisibility in terms of the health service, I think, is a massive problem for us. Complete misunderstanding, even just in primary care settings. Trans people tell me that, you know, that they tend to get all of their health issues. It's because you're trans. They talk about the trans cough, right? You've got to go and see the gender identity because you've got cough. And gay men, well, you know, there are other people here better placed than I to talk about that. But what I do think is that we as a community, we're so busy being defensive and rightly supporting each other, but we never get the space and time to talk within the community about what our different experiences are, what our shared experiences are, and how we can support each other with some of the commonalities that we face, you know, such as complete and utter mystification on the part of a number of health professionals who really should understand our lives.
Why do you think that invisibility exists?
Well, it's partly, I think, it's partly because we haven't been that forceful, as particularly, I would say, women are not that forceful at going challenging the ignorance on, and it is sometimes just ignorance on the part of on the part of health professionals. I mean, all the lessons that gay men learned fighting AIDS about challenging health professionals, we seem not to have managed to pick that up for ourselves, and so we're still lone people fighting the battles on an individual basis rather than clubbing together and really making a stand. And consequently, I think people in the health service get away with stuff that they really would not do with other communities.
We'll talk more about that in a moment. Tom, just moving on to you, you've written lots about mental health.
Yeah.
In your day job, you've also done lots, generally around this issue. When it comes to some of the challenges that you think people in the LGBTQ community face for mental health, for physical health, what do you see being at the base of that challenge?
Well, just echoing what Liz was just saying just then, obviously we do get labelled as the LGBTQ community, and obviously people just assume we're facing the same challenges at the same time, whereas actually we all face different barriers. Older people with mental health and loneliness, the BAME community of HIV, different types of stigma. Obviously, as a gay white man, we've all different challenges. It's about communicating how we deal with them personally, but also educating not just the people external to our community, but kind of empowering the people by our side that are facing similar but not the same kind of issues, and kind of fighting it together but in our own way.
Yeah,
education's key, isn't it? So.
Absolutely, something we'll get on to more a little bit later. Don't forget you can get involved in the discussion throughout this very special Facebook Live by commenting below. It's as simple as that. Adele, you speak to thousands of young people through your show on BBC Radio 1. What sort of things are young people saying to you about the challenges they face when it comes to health?
I think it's getting better. What's really lovely for me is getting to play music by artists that are already out. By the time their music comes to me, they're already out and proud. So there's bands like Moona who use non-gender specific lyrics in their songs. There's people like Hayley Kiyoko, who is going to be my record of the week next week. And she is, well, people call her lesbian Jesus. They absolutely love her. And going back to what Liz said before, she's there, she's out, she's proud, she's vocal, and she's somebody that young lesbians can get excited about and bring us all together and talk about the things that lesbians have to face that might be separate to guys and maybe transgender people. And so I definitely think it's getting better, but I think online also brings the trolls with it as well. You know, it brings the problems too. So it's kind of like easier for us to find each other, easier for us to be empowered, but also easier for the bigots to find us. And I think that's something that needs to be sorted out.
It's something we'll get on to more a little bit later, but really interesting to hear you say, and uplifting actually, that you see things getting better. Yeah. Mark, in your work, do you see things getting better?
Yeah, I mean, things are certainly improving, particularly around sexual health. As I said, you know, we saw diagnoses drop in London, particularly last year, you know, by 40%, in a way that's never happened before. But and more people are aware of PrEP, they're more aware of accessing services, but we're still parts of our community that aren't able to access or don't know that things are available and services are available to them. And I think, like everybody else on the panel has said, is that we as a community need to probably get a bit better at enabling and supporting those of us who may not be as privileged. I think it's fascinating that things are getting better for young people, and I love seeing that. But picking up on what Liz was saying around kind of the invisible generations, right? So we do have an ageing population, you know, who are men and women who have lived through the epidemic or may not have lived through the epidemic, whatever, who aren't having services to meet their needs. So people who are moving into old age might go to care homes where they're not suited or fit for purpose for older LGBTQ people. So whilst absolutely I think things are getting better for younger people, I think we mustn't forget that the older parts of our population, I think that's where we as a community can really come together to do some fantastic intergenerational work, which will improve stuff for all of us.
Yeah. We've touched on this a little bit already, but we've already spoken about apps, about online culture, about trolls in some senses, but also the positives, Tom, that apps and the online world can bring, particularly where health is concerned. Do you view it as a positive or a negative?
Definitely, there's a lot of positive out there. The information has never been so freely available. It's at your fingertips. But like Adele was saying, the downside is there's a lot of negativity out there. And unfortunately, platforms like, I'm not going to name any names, but there are so many platforms out there that we all use that aren't doing enough to address the trolling issue. I myself, I've had death threats. I've had dozens of death threats. And it gets to a point where you do gain a thicker skin, but when a kid, there are plenty of people out there owning their own stories, sharing them with the world, trying to empower other people, you know, in a good time of their life, then suddenly they're not equipped to deal with the backlash that they get. And that's what we're trying to tackle, I think, when it comes to the trolling.
Yeah.
We've had a really interesting question in, a point rather actually, from Caroline, who says that when it comes to young people, I'm lucky that my daughter's school helps all the LGBT kids that are there. Liz, in the work that you do, advocating as a spokesperson for LGBT people in the Dem Party, do you see that there has been rather a real shift in things getting better, young people having very different experiences in school with everyday life than they would have done, 20 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I go back to the point I made before. I think for LGBT people, life is obviously a great deal better than it was when I was at school. I still think that trans kids have a really, really, really tough time. Similarly, I think that, talking about online stuff, the trans community at the moment is putting up with such vicious hatred coming at them online, that really is, all of us have got to be there to support them to get through a period of pure hate, just pure hate. And we will get through it, we will make progress, because we are resilient and we're tough, and we've done it before and we will do it again. But we really need to be there. And I think the second thing I would say is that we need to get better as a community about being self-resilient. I've given up waiting for the NHS to do it for us, I think. The 5-year forward plan for mental health. Do you know how many times the word lesbian got mentioned? 2. But when it came to the implementation plan, nah, not there at all. And yet we know in the LGBT community we have got higher incidence of mental health issues, not surprisingly, because we've had to live our lives with all the sort of trauma and prejudice that's been thrown at us. So it's not surprising. And if we wait, well, it's not going to happen. So I think we really have to start becoming very much more self-resilient and looking out for each other in the community.
Marc, nodding your head there.
I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. When I look at some of the work that we have done around BME and black communities, where we saw that, say, other organisations were not responding to our needs, we went out and we built and we developed our own, to respond. And not only was we responded directly to our community needs, and the work that we were doing was fit for purpose. And I think you're absolutely right. We have a really long history in our community, going way back 40 odd years, 50 years of doing stuff for ourselves. And so I think there is a little bit now going forward of utilising so much of the great energy, the young people, the experience, the knowledge that we have, and building for ourselves. So events like this, conversations like this, are a starting point to actually building the foundation for something strong in the future.
Yeah, and this is online, so that's great.
Yeah.
And then secondly, allies. So what Marc was saying, we can only do so much.
Yes.
Allies, please help us.
Yeah.
Be visible, help us out. Just know that there's probably people that in your friend set, in your family, that might be LGBTQI, and stand up for them and make sure that, if anything negative happens to those people, call it out.
Do you think that the online world is fueling some of this hatred, some of this bullying, some of this stigmatisation? Do you think that actually online places like Facebook, places like Twitter could do more to tackle
Without
this?
Without a doubt, yeah. They could be filtering out language for starters.
Yeah.
They could be putting filter, when people are, because I think you can be 14 when you join Facebook.
Yeah.
That's a really young age. And I was so terrified at the thought of being gay. And if I'd have gone onto Facebook at that time and spoken my truth, that would have taken a lot. And then to have someone knock me down for that, that could have scarred me for the rest of my life. So I think that Facebook, those platforms need to do better, and they need to protect their community a lot more. But also I think that, again, we all need to just look out for each other, and allies, again, they can help out with that as well.
Absolutely.
What can allies do?
Just, I think, come to Pride with us, come and celebrate with us, make sure that when you're at your workplace that you know how the appropriate language to use around people. Going back to the trans community, let's make sure that we address people in the right way. I'm learning about that all the time. I'll put my hands up, I need to get better at that. And it's just, hopefully there are people that are allies that are watching this and sharing this, and it's not just LGBTQI people. You know,
do you think that's really important, that you're bringing people into the conversation that aren't almost, you know, already on board with what you're saying? That actually the people that might be posting the stuff online that isn't what you want to hear should be actually the ones that are watching things like this.
I mean, I agree with you to a certain point, but I'm also really minded about trying to ensure that the young folk on the receiving end have the tools to push back against that. You know, because very often, you know, you want that 14-year-old to come away and be able to talk to somebody who's been through it and go, okay, so next time I go online, this is what I need to do. Dealing with the trolls and the haters is one thing, it's really important, but we can put so much of our energy into that we end up neglecting working with those young people or anybody in our community that needs that support, and they feel, you know, they don't have the language or the tools to fight back.
Yeah, a really interesting point coming in from Will, who says that it's the comment on resilience is great and so needed. We all need to come together as a community, LGBT and straight allies, mirroring what we've just heard. Talking is so key to stopping the stigma on mental health, says Will. Yeah. Please do keep your comments and thoughts coming in by commenting below. Really is as simple as that. Tom, do you think when you hear about, you know, some of the death threats that you said that you have coming in on your social media, you hear about the sorts of things some of the people that are speaking to you on your social platforms have to say, does it put you off from being open, from talking, from doing the sort of journalism that you do?
Of course. It does prevent me, and it has in the past. It has made me kind of dilute down my messaging behind it, and obviously using my own personal, because I've got a platform and I do write for quite a big magazine. I do try to use my own personal experience because obviously it's relatable. But when you get that kind of response, and from people I know as well, it's not just people online, especially when you talk about HIV, I've had negativity from people I've worked with and from my family, because then they see the reaction that externally is going to happen, and then they just feel like, don't fuel it, why are you talking about it? And then it's just stigma magnified, but they don't realise that stigma. They don't realise telling you not to open up about what you've gone through. They don't realise that they're pushing you back in that box, and it's not a healthy place to be put into. Yeah,
I think it's a really important point, and actually that issue of you know, giving advice to young people that we touched on already is something we'll go into now, that given that discrimination, given the bullying that's out there that many people face, I'm sure many people watching this on a daily basis. Adele, how can people's health be better supported? What can be done to make things better alongside, you know, you mentioned the social media taking more of a standpoint on this?
Well, one thing that Heads Together are doing is they're using digital platforms, first of all, to reach young people, because I think this is where the big change is going to come from. Like Marc said, we need to look after the older generation, but the young ones, if we can change their minds going forward, hopefully we can change things a lot. So Heads Together are reaching younger people. They're going into schools, they're going into workplaces, and they're also going into the military and just changing the narrative and explaining how situations can make people feel. And I think it's going into those institutions and changing the culture within those big institutions, because when I was at school, my teachers didn't recognise gay relationships. I didn't even get taught about straight relationships in sex education. I felt like I had a day off or something. It's like, where's our lesson where we get to put a condom on a banana? You know, I never got to do that. So yeah, I didn't have any sort of education, especially trans as well. I didn't even know what a trans person was when I was at school, and I don't think that's good enough. I think that's where it starts. That's where the change is going to come from.
We all, to a certain extent, laugh about not having been able to put a condom on a banana, but there is a really serious side to that, isn't there? Yeah. There's a generation of people, many generations of people that haven't had the basic education in school that many young people, some perhaps aren't getting, but many are getting today. How do you reverse that? What do you do to get into the minds, to change perceptions of people who have lived their lives with views that some people sitting on this panel, some people watching this might find abhorrent?
Well, the first thing I think is that we need to change relationship and sex education. The government has said that they are going to do that. They've said that they're going to make it inclusive. That started under Justine Greening when she was Education Minister. And they better start consulting about that. And we as a community really need to be there to make sure that when it comes to the final detail, it truly is inclusive and that it does apply to all schools, so that kids are not growing up without the basic information that they need to be safe. That's what we're about. We're not about proselytising or trying to make people gay or anything like that. It's just about making sure that every young person is safe and healthy. And I think the second thing that we need to do is that work with allies, you know, families and parents, grandparents, and all, they really are important, and making sure that they are informed and confident enough to make sure that home is a safe place for kids, I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, talking of which, Alex has been in touch to say, what's your advice to young LGBT people who may be struggling with their mental health and unsure where to turn? We'll talk more about that in just a moment's time. But first, here's a recap of the week's stories.
Sir Elton John has called for people to stop using social media platforms to curb the amount of homophobic abuse online. Speaking to Kirsty Wark on the BBC's Newsnight, the singer said, "It's supposed to be free speech, but the things that are on social media are just so disgusting that there has to be action taken by the people who run these companies." He had been giving a lecture on behalf of the National AIDS Trust and had praised the work of Diana, Princess of Wales. LGBT teachers in rural areas are 9 times more likely to suffer from poor mental health than those in cities. Reporting on a study by Anglia Ruskin University, Schools Week said 30% of teachers in rural schools have left a role because of homophobia, compared with just 17% in towns or cities. The report found that there was little difference between teaching in primary or secondary schools. Human rights activist and campaigner Peter Tatchell has travelled to Russia ahead of this year's World Cup. Speaking to Gay Star News, the London Pride pioneer said he wants to raise awareness of Russia's maltreatment of its LGBT+ community. He also raised concerns over FIFA's decision to allow countries with poor human rights records to host the games. It comes as members of the European Parliament sent packets of rainbow shoelaces to football teams across Europe. And Andrew Garfield has dedicated his Tony Award to members of the LGBT+ community across the world. As reported in The Independent, he picked up the gong for his performance in Angels in America. In the show, he plays Prior Walter, a gay man living with AIDS who experiences heavenly visions throughout the story. Referring to a recent US Supreme Court decision that ruled in favour of a baker who refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, the star said, "We are all sacred and all belong, so let's just bake a cake for everyone who wants a cake to be baked."
You're watching Pride in London live. Just picking up on what you've just seen, Liz, any messages to Peter Tatchell?
Oh, a lot of love to Peter. I am a big fan of Peter's. I have been for years. I'm a patron of this foundation. There's nobody braver than Peter, and we're all thinking about him, and I hope he's well.
Peter Tatchell arrested and released. Right, you heard just before that from Alex, who asked for advice to young LGBT people struggling with their mental health, unsure where to turn. Tom, what advice would you give?
Obviously, we've been talking about online a lot. Reach out to the right kind of charities. There's people like the LGBT Foundation, Stonewall. There's some great charities out there, but also support groups as well. There are support groups out there. It does depend on where you live. Obviously, London is quite condensed, but reach out. There are services out there. Have a look online. Try and get in touch with people going through the same kind of thing. It's always better when you can relate to what's going on with someone else who's gone through it themselves. But obviously there are counsellors out there as well, and nowadays schools have got better. There's a lot of work to be done, but some schools do actually facilitate that kind of stuff as well.
Did you feel well supported at school?
It was difficult for me at school. I got outed when I was 15, so just as I went into my last year, and I think the first 6 months was incredibly tough, and I grew up under Section 28 and no support. I would have teachers feet away watching homophobic bullying and not doing anything about it, literally turning a blind eye. And I actually got invited to go and speak back at my school, and I'm going to do that in September, in the new year. And one of the teachers who did that, I'm going to be having a conversation with and just kind of getting her side of things. Because it was weird, because I had a gay head teacher, like we were just discussing. I had a gay head teacher. You could see it in his eyes, the empathy, and you could see that he cared, but he was so constrained by, obviously, the law and not promoting homosexuality and doing anything to protect students. It was tough. I'm not going to lie, but it kind of made me who I am now. But I would rather, I would never want anyone else to go through that.
Did you struggle to accept that invitation? To go back?
Yes, I did. It's the second time they've invited me. The first time I wasn't prepared to go back whatsoever, because I saw it as quite as a toxic, and it basically screwed up my GCSEs, what happened to me when I was at school, and that affected the rest of my life. Luckily, I got myself back on track after a couple of years, but if I could go back, or if I could speak to anyone, I would just be like, address it, get support, and go on it, tackle it head on, because there is something you can do about it now. We're not in the place we were back then, but there are people out there now who are willing to support them. Teachers are willing to support LGBT students now, but it's about being vocal about it. If you've got that courage and you've got that strength, use it. If you haven't, get it. There are people out there.
Congratulations to you though for being that change.
Yeah.
You are that person for those young people now.
But I never saw that, like, I appreciate that,
Well
but you
done.
never see it as that, do you? Like,
No.
because obviously there's always people worse off than you, and I think it could have been a lot worse for me. I got attacked at school, but it was never too violent. But then where's that line? Where's too violent? I think anything to happen, even to be walking through the corridors and being called, no, I won't say the words I was called at school. It was tough, but like I said, it made me who I am, but no one should have to go through that.
There's a great charity called Just Like Us. Their
Yeah, I
name
know.
is either Just Like Us or Just Like Us. It could be either, and I like the ambiguity of that. And they do that
They do some
exactly
great work,
that. They send people who are young people who trained into school, and it started by Tim Ramsey, who said, you know, if a gay person had turned up at his school and said, do you know what, life's all right, that would have made a hell of a difference to him. So big support to them.
Just that one little sentence from someone just having visible, like we were saying earlier about visible pop stars, it's a game changer now. We've got out and proud pop stars. Just to see that visible person saying they're comfortable and happy with who they are at that young, impressionable age, you don't realise how valuable that can be.
I mean, if I can just add in something really quick, because I think celebrities and names are all really good as well, but there is something about changing the conversation within the communities and having more of those stories where there have been successes. So we talk, for example, about some communities being more homophobic than others. You know, some people say BME communities are more homophobic than other communities, which in my experience, they generally aren't, right? So what I want to see, particularly for young BME, young black people, is to see the narratives come out which are success stories. So when I came out in 1985, my family were hugely supportive and really rallied round me. So I think if we hear more narratives where it's gone really, really well, that encourages young people to find support, to go, actually, it's going to be okay for me to do this, and if it's not, then there's a support for me. So there is a bit about spinning it ever so slightly as well.
Is the focus on celebrities potentially problematic?
I think no, I don't think it is problematic. I think it's absolutely fine, but we have to remember that celebrities are broad and we're broad as well. So while you may have a particular celebrity from a particular pop group, that may not appeal to, for example, a young black man who comes from South London. If you have, like, you know, a really kind of gender non-binary person, you know, if Stormzy comes out and supports gay rights, which he's done in the past, maybe that might help that young black queer person. That's what I'm thinking about. When we think about celebrities, it's who are our celebrities and who are they speaking to?
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Liz, what do you think could change attitudes, particularly around stigma when it comes to things like PrEP, to HIV drugs, to sexual health? What is going to change attitudes?
I think attitudes change. I always say that minorities get equality when majorities understand it and understand that it's okay, and that relies upon us in our community saying, hey, we're being discriminated against and this is what it's like and it's wrong. It is also about ensuring that the people who've got the power to change things have the people around pushing them to do that. But equally, it's so important to have allies who say, right, you think you're doing this in my name? No, you're not. You really shouldn't. And the big drivers are the media, religion and education. They are the three big drivers of public attitudes. So it's making sure that we and our allies and the decision makers are all putting forward the messages about what it is that we need to change, just so that we can have equality. We don't want any special treatment, thank you very much. We just want to be equal, treated equally. And it's getting those measures across to people who are the opinion formers in the media, in the religion and in politics.
Mark, how do you tackle that stigma? I mean, given the work that you do,
Yeah,
what would you like to see happen?
I mean, I think there's, you know, the HIV stigma, you know, continues to persist. I think what I'm going to talk about here is, excuse me, HIV stigma, which is within our community, which prevents us either accessing PrEP because, you know, we may slut shame people and think, you know, it's a really bad thing to do. So I think in terms of turning the lens in on ourselves, I think we need to kind of recognise and have a much more mature conversation, be more compassionate, kind of accept that if people are taking PrEP, which can prevent HIV, they're making a proactive, healthy choice. Gay men are not being complacent by making this decision. So I think, and also recognising, for example, our history of HIV. We have lost a lot of people, and we need to recognise and remember that and show some respect. So I think that that conversation needs to be more mature, needs to grow up, because we are having sex and we are kind of engaging. So these things put us at risk. So we need to be mature, adult, and try to be grown up about having that conversation.
Fantastic stuff. We've had some really interesting comments in on Facebook, on social networks. Thank you very much indeed for watching and for sharing them with us. Let's just pick up a few. David says that I struggled with depression when I was at secondary school. That was about the same time that I was wanting to come out, and I never felt that there was any support for me professionally, both in and out of school. While Andrea says, how incredible is it that we as a community managed to fund and build the first LGBT plus community centre in London. James, meanwhile, I think says, I think this is going to move on to the next point. James asks, what can we do to stop the cuts to LGBT plus health services, especially around 56 Dean Street, which saw huge cuts recently, being a vital outreach to our community's health? Tom, do you want to pick up on that?
Well, a broader answer aside, be vocal about what's going on in your community.
Yes.
We've all got a voice. It doesn't matter whether you've got 10 followers or 10,000 followers. Speaking to the people that you've got in your community, in your circle, what makes, especially when it comes to HIV, mental health, or just being gay, what makes it relatable is your personal experience. And we all know people that don't have any contact with someone that's gay, someone that's got HIV or mental health problems, and just sharing and being open and honest. But going forward on what you just asked about what we can do individually, speak out. If you're happy to speak out about your mental health problems, the statistics that 1 in 4 mental health affects 1 in 4 of us.
Yeah.
And that's at a period in their life. Yeah, we all know someone that struggled with HIV. Mental health. HIV, generally, I think we all know someone that's got HIV, whether we know it or not. I'm HIV positive. I've got a lot of friends that are. And yeah, it's just about being vocal about your own personal experiences, but sharing them with your friends as well.
And when you are vocal, what sort of response do you get?
It's always going to be mixed. You'll always... I've been very shocked at how many friends I've lost, talking about HIV especially, but equally mental health as well. I mean, we all talk about mental health awareness, but it's so much more than just a 1 day or 1 week a year. It's about not making snap judgments when your friend slightly changes their behaviour a bit, and it's not going, oh, he's a bit of a rude so-and-so. It's about actually knowing who, you know, if they're your friend, you should know who they are as a person. If their behaviour changes, there might be reasons behind that. Not automatically go into the negative. When it comes to HIV, don't assume someone's been down the sauna and that's how they got it. It's none of your business, really. Like Marc just said, we're having sex. We're living our lives. Unfortunately, it's going to affect us mentally, it's going to affect us physically. We're all in this together. I mean, there's so much more we could be focusing on. There's so many great things going on in our community, like the LGBT Community Centre, which is a landmark thing. That's incredible how much money they've raised. They just hit their £100,000 target, didn't they?
Congratulations, yeah. That said, how do you deal with losing friends? I mean, you know, you speak out about it, you expect people around you to support you. How do you deal with it?
If you'd asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have given you a really long answer. But I didn't lose a friend. Because if I'd lost a friend, that just wouldn't have happened. So I'm strong, I'm resilient, I've got used to letting people go who I don't really align with and they just don't understand me. But obviously thinking about other people that are just experiencing this for the first time. Be strong. Don't fight for people's attention or fight for them to understand where you're coming from, because if they were really supposed to be in your life, they would be making that effort as well. Go and find your people, because they're not your people.
Adele, sorry, I was just going to say, I think there can definitely be more help as well for friends of people who have mental health problems. I've had a few friends that have gone through really tough times and I've tried to help them. There was one friend that ended up being hospitalised, and due to not enough money being in the NHS, the hospital had to discharge this person. I was in a panic because I didn't really feel that that person was going to be safe and that they were going to be able to look after themselves, and I didn't really know what to do or where to go, and I was asking the NHS what I should do, and there's not really any sort of strong game plan at the moment. So I think we can get a bit better at supporting the people that support the people with mental health problems as well.
If I can add to that, there is something I'm working on at the moment. It's just an article about activism and campaigning. but I've approached a number of activists from trans to HIV to mental health, and I've asked them a set of 5 questions. I was like, what inspired you? Who inspires you? But what could we do as an ally? What can we do to be a trans ally? And I think just trying to explain and trying to get their opinions and thoughts on how we can all grow, because obviously we all go around, I'm a trans ally, I'm a bisexual ally, but what does that mean? What can we do? We can all say that we're supporting them, but there are things that need to be done, like by visibility.
Yeah, good stuff. Afraid to say we are almost out of time, but thank you so much to all of you. It's been fascinating. I've learned a lot and really interesting to hear from you all. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching and for commenting and for sharing your thoughts. It's been great to have you viewing, and do keep those comments coming in. Thank you very much indeed for watching us. Have a great Thursday evening.